This is episode number 146, featuring art historian Molly Siple, and she's going to talk to you about building your art career so that you're remembered.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plain air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir Podcast. My name is Rhoads. I'm honored you would spend time with me today. I've been hearing from a lot of people telling me, they're listening in their cars, they're listening in their studios, when they're taking walks. Thank you. It really means a lot to me that you would take the time to spend time with me. My team works really hard on putting this together, and we just love doing it for you. We just love plein air painting. So thank you. And I hope that if you haven't tried plein air painting yet, I hope you'll try it. For the past few days, I've been with friends painting in France. And then we connected in Provence, where we began our annual fine art connoisseur art trip. We've been the whole time we've been going behind the scenes at art museums, art collections, meeting with curators, going to private collections. It's been fun. And I'm going to have a story about this in the upcoming issue of Fine Art Connoisseur, and I'll probably tell you more about it, but that's all I can say. It's a wonderful experience and blown away. The best part of the people, quite frankly, everybody is so friendly. It's so much fun. We all have this thing in common that we love art. You and I will be connecting in about a month at the Figurative Art Convention, FACE. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. If you want to know more about that, it's figurativeartconvention.com. It's really, really, really good. We work really hard on that. And I should probably let you know that I've been told that the deadline on early bird pricing for the Plein Air Convention happens at the end of this month, November 29th. And you should get it done, even if you're thinking about attending, because there's always a rush on the deadline day, November 29th. And there are less than 200 seats left. This convention is sold faster and more than any convention in our history. By this time, we've never been this high. So I think there's a likelihood it's going to sell out. Probably months and months and months to go, and yet there probably won't be seats left. And I'm not yanking your chain. This is really the case. I mean, it's just going to be hard to get into this one. And, you got an amazing lineup of artists. Can't even possibly mention them all right now, but you should go to the website, check them out. It's pleinairconvention.com, see who's coming. And then I'd love for you to come, and I'd love to meet you. It's always fun to do that. We do art marketing sessions in the mornings too, and lots of other stuff. Coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering some art marketing questions in the Marketing Minute. But let's get right to the interview, though, with contemporary art historian and author Molly Siple, and learn more about what you can do with your career. Molly Siple, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Molly, you and I met probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yes.
I think I was just starting the magazine, or maybe I hadn't even started it yet when I encountered you, probably through the California Art Club.
Yes, I've been a member for about almost 30 years, I would say,
wow.
From the very beginning when Peter and Lane took over.
So for the benefit of everybody listening that might not know who you are or know about you, which of course everybody already does, but for those who don't, give a little bit of an overview of what it is that you've done and your involvement in the arts.
For sure. I would say that by now I have interviewed over 200 artists, mostly plein air artists. And that's because back in the early 1990s, the California Art Club began its wonderful newsletter, which now goes nationally. And I began by writing artist profiles for the newspaper, for the newsletter, and have never stopped. I work with Elaine Adams, who is a Madam Editor-in-Chief, and we've had a wonderful time doing that. And then out of that, I got a reputation for writing, and so John Stern asked me to join on the book on the Catalina painters, Enchanted Isle, and that was with the Plein Air Painters of America. Consequently, then when the California Art Club had its 100th anniversary, we were sitting around a table saying, Elaine said, maybe we should do a book. I said, are you interested in national distribution? Oh, well, that could be. And through Lois Brown, we presented it to Rizzoli, the idea of doing a book on plein air painting in California, and they immediately said yes. And so California Light ensued with John Stern as my co-author, and he writes, of course, on the history, and I write on the contemporary painters. And then we did Painting California as the second book. So in each of those books, there were about 90 or more artists.
Oh, and they're fabulous books. I use them as references all the time.
I'm very proud of it, and I should say that the newsletter too is archival. We triple check the facts, so it's really a publication of record, and that's very important to our field.
So I would say that you would be a contemporary historian.
In a way, yes. In fact, yes. I've never thought of that, but sure.
Well,
yeah.
Certainly. And of course, some of the artists that you've talked about or written about are no longer with us.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. I also happen to write the obituaries for the newsletter. I do that almost every month, and I'm extremely careful with that because it becomes so cherished by the family, but also the final record. And so, yes, it becomes history. You're right.
Absolutely. Well, the reason I wanted to get you on the podcast today is because I think that your role is so important that I think you could give some artists some ideas and some direction based on what you've learned and based on some of the patterns that you've seen over the years. And also, I should mention that you've done some writing for us in the past and of course, for others. And, you know, your attention to detail is second to none. You just are, you really make sure that you checked your facts, and that's why you have such high credibility, and everybody wants you to be involved in authoring their books. One of the things that I am curious about is, you know, like you, I've interviewed a lot of artists, and you're better at it than I am. So I should be talking to you about ideas on interviewing, But one of the things that I think would be curious for painters is that they get to, they do things in their careers. You know, we're all trying to figure this out, trying to figure out how do we market ourselves. And, you know, of course I teach marketing, but the parts that I don't really teach about are the parts that you're really focusing on, which I think are really, really critical. And that is, you know, you're giving artists critical acclaim, you're giving them historical, you're putting them in print historically. So that's kind of where I want to go today. Would that be okay with you?
Mm-hmm. Sure, yes.
So I suppose one of the first questions that I would have if I were an artist, I am an artist, but I'm not in any books, is how do I, as an artist, get to the point where a historian like yourself, contemporary historian, would say, you know, this person is good enough, needs to be paid attention to, needs to be written about? What are the things that artists should be doing?
Well, they have to show up. They have to get to be better known. They would be members of an art club, presumably, and they would begin to participate in activities. They would be on panels. They would have fresh new ideas. they may be taking a new approach to painting, something that would be intriguing to readers. I just did a workshop, because I do paint too, with Peggy Kroll Roberts and Ray Roberts, and they had a very clever presentation that'll make a terrific article, which I plan to do. Isn't about winning awards, though it might, play into their reputation. But you have to be kind of entertaining, interesting to talk to, because that's what I'll be looking for when I'm doing the interview, and not be a shy violet, and not be too reticent about, publicizing themselves. And of course, a lot of the younger artists are having, doing their blogs and whatever, and they already have a kind of community out there. Well, so all of that goes in the right direction.
Well, I'm curious, and I want to challenge this for just a second, if I might.
Sure.
And that is, let's just say that there's a brilliant artist. Let's just say that brilliant artist is Carl Dempwolf. Okay, I'll just use Carl as an example, because I'm staring at a beautiful painting he sent me. And let's say that Carl was extremely shy, not very good at promoting himself, and didn't really want to sit on committees and didn't really want to be heavily involved, but his work was so deserving. How do you determine that?
Well, I would probably also be hearing from other artists that he was doing very fine work, and then go out of my way to notice that. The work would be in exhibits, of course, and so I would come across it that way. I wonder if people may be wondering, Kathy Cadju's painting was on the cover of California Light, and by chance I had gone to the Pepperdine show, and that little image, no one was talking about whatever, and I spotted that because it was graphic and more two-dimensional, that I know art directors want that, particularly in books, and I submitted that painting. I never told anybody, whatever, and it turned out to be on the cover. So you never know. But it's important. Yeah.
So I just want to kind of go backwards on this for just a second.
I may have gone away from what you said.
No, you haven't gone away at all. But I want to.
Okay.
I like to probe things and understand them a little bit
sure.
better.
Well, here's another thing. That person who's very shy, reticent, doesn't want to brag, whatever, they better then hire somebody to do it for you, because almost none of us can write our own press releases. And when I do one for someone, they go, "Oh my heavens, is that me?" So you want to be out in the world. You may need some help doing that, and that's okay to delegate that part of the task of marketing yourself. You're not the marketer, but get someone to do it for you.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because I've told a story on this podcast before that I flew to England to meet with an artist who was, I think, every bit as brilliant as Monet, and had thousands or maybe hundreds of paintings that he had never shown anyone, and refused to market himself. His attitude was, well, if somebody wants it, they'll find me. And I proposed managing his career and operating, marketing him and building up, and he was like, no, I don't want that. He was a very shy man that worked at the post office, and so I think that there are a lot of people out there that are brilliant that'll never be heard of. How do you feel about that?
There may be the secret Mozarts out there, but I don't know what the probability of that is. And in the kind of world we live in, it is a marketing world. It is product oriented, and I think you have to kind of join the party a little in some way, or we won't find you.
So, how much do you pay attention to social media?
I don't do very much, I have to tell you. I'm working right now only through the California Art Club, and it's our membership. I'm sure other people would. I think it's important. I personally don't, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't be effective for an artist to pursue, all those avenues.
Yeah, but I think that this is a really important point, because I oftentimes teach that you can't have just one pillar, and a lot of people, especially people who are enamored with Facebook and Instagram, will assume that Facebook and Instagram are their marketing strategy, and yet here you are, a major author who's doing major books, who isn't looking at them online, and they're assuming they're reaching everybody. And I think that's really a really critically important thing. So you're discovering people by their interaction and their involvement in the club.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am, yes.
Now, what about people who would be members, national members, for instance, that might not be there locally and might not be as involved?
Well, most of the national members are usually pretty advanced artists who we already would know of, and so they don't. I just did an article on Adrienne Stein because I had seen her painting at the gold medal and fell in love with it, and she was featured in the summer issue of the newsletter. So it didn't matter at all that she was across the country. And in fact, most of the time right now, I live in Mexico, so I'm doing all the interviews long distance from there.
we did her first publicity. We put her on the cover
of
Fine Art Connoisseur many years ago. So she's really really happening right now. So
yeah,
you've got good taste.
And also because she's a female painter, and we tend to, a lot of articles are on the men, and it was like good. And then she sort of had this feminist cast to her work, and I thought, good, let's get that theme going in there too. And romantic, and then the historical part too for her.
All right,
so she was a good choice. Yep.
So let's talk about that subject, because I think it's a very important subject historically, probably because it was more of a man's world back in the back in the day, back in the 1800s and so on. The Impressionists, obviously there were some females, but the men got all the attention. What's happening today from your perspective? Is that changing? What needs to change? How do we need to be looking at things?
I think women maybe could do more, but I mean, they're a presence, but we could do more. What can I say? There's still probably quite a bit of the guys' club in some sense.
So is that something that can be penetrated? Is it something that, when you say they need to do more, what does that mean?
They may have to form their own shows.
Okay.
Even, yeah. And I would say make sure that they stay to themes that they really believe in. What is their authentic expression, and not trying to just be communicating in the same vein as the men, if they have something else to say, which might be more ethereal, it might be more spiritual, it might be softer. I don't mean to say these feminine cliches, but women do see the world in a different way. Our subject matter can be different, the importance of different things in our lives. And so, holding to your own voice would be important, I think.
Well, that it still seems to me, and I don't want to get into any trouble. I don't want any emails from anybody, but it still seems to me that the people that are getting the recognition as the biggest contemporary masters of our time tend to be male. And there clearly are a few exceptions to that, but there are a lot of people out there that are deserving, that aren't getting what they're deserving. But there's also a level that a lot of people, both male and female, are not yet attaining. How do we get them there?
To national recognition.
Yeah, to being perceived as masters. I mean, it's about the development of work. It's, recognition is great, but it's got to be at, these people are at this level.
Well, Eric, I actually can't tell you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, do they, start to promote themselves in a major way? And how do they do that? I don't know how you shift the powers that be. It's not Machiavellian, but people kind of tend to move in the art world in groups. And I don't know how they would break through.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry.
I appreciate your candor on that, and quite frankly, I don't think it's only a marketing problem. If it were a marketing problem, there are a lot of really brilliant marketers out there that would be breaking through. But I don't know if it's a gallery problem, a perception issue, or if there's some other issue. But we'll move on to a completely different part of this. Like
you're
I said,
the expert. Yeah, no, I don't know. Well, let's go on.
So you have you've done 200 plus interviews with artists.
Yeah.
And you probably from time to time, I know this happens to me, from time to time you get one, you go like, why did I ever invite that person? Because it's like yes, no. You can't get anything out of them. So let's talk about principles that artists need to learn in order to properly represent themselves when being interviewed.
Excellent question. Okay. First, I want to have the listeners know that they are as important to the person who is interviewing them than the other way around, because an editor is facing blank pages. So we need to also fill our pages with what they have to say. And what is important is to be as interesting as you can be. The person who has the better story gets more space. At least that's the case when you're doing a book. If you are having an article written on you, be aware that it would be, you have to fill about 6 pages for the writer. When I worked for American Artists, all articles were 1,500 words. The California Art Club newsletter, 1,800 words. That's 6 pages. I also have found that I need a minimum of 500 words to do any sort of biographical generalization. A little profile of an artist would need to be 500 pages. 500 words,
let me stop you there, because that's so what's in that? What are you trying to say of I need 500 words? In other words, I need enough information on shows you've done, history. What is it?
No. Okay. Let me say that. Let me then follow through with that. These days, everybody has their website, and so that the raw facts and figures mostly go into that now, because that doesn't make very interesting reading. You may have an important, very important award. There may be a school that is particularly significant because of the work you're doing, but it's more about the philosophy, the inspiration, the aesthetics, the historic origins of your work. It's the more colorful side of who you are that would make the best summary of your work. I wanted to just say a few things more about first holding the interview, if I can.
Sure.
Thanks. You can expect about an hour of conversation or more. You want to set up a very comfortable place to sit if you are doing it in person, which is always preferred on the phone, if that's possible. I don't know how often that happens these days. But to have a setting where you're not sitting directly across from the person interviewing you. It's a confrontational arrangement. You want to be at right angles or a little more open. And in that situation, then if either of you want to break contact, you just look straight ahead and you're not looking away from the person who's talking to you.
Why does that matter? I'm not tracking on this.
Okay, it's because it's too formal or too harsh an arrangement to be sitting in directly across from someone. It's too confrontational,
which means it hurts you in some way. You're not as open. What is it? The outcome?
You may be more nervous in talking. You may want to have a little breather to take a breath and think about the next thing you want to say, and you don't quite know what it is. Well, there you are. You can kind of lean back and break away from your interview a little. Right. So it's not an interrogation. Let's say it that way.
Don't be afraid, if you're being interviewed, don't be afraid to pause, to think, to take a breath. Because
absolutely.
Yeah.
And also you want to talk fairly slowly. If the person's handwriting, they probably are. Nobody is tape recording and transcribing later. You also don't want to do a run-on presentation where there's no back and forth in the conversation. And that does happen, where people have it all saved up and then they just talk and
ramble.
Or ramble, yes. The other thing, you don't want to say the nugget of what you've been planning to say while the person's getting out of the car before they're in your house. And that has happened to me, where someone will say, well, the essence of my aesthetic, and you go, whoa, wait a minute, slow down. So, but much preferred is going to lunch with your interviewer. And then the conversation is much more spontaneous and more relaxed, and better information usually comes out and better quotes. And of course, you get a restaurant that is comfortable and lets you sit there for a while and isn't too noisy. But that's sort of the trick of doing a good interview, for me at least, is going out somewhere with that person. You were talking about someone, not having very much to say, and that is absolutely the worst, the monosyllabic answer. So, for instance, if I say to somebody, I just heard that you came in from Cuba and you were painting there, and they say, oh, yeah, that's right, or something like that. What you want to answer is, oh, what a fabulous opportunity. From the moment we cleared customs and walked out onto those streets with the beautiful architecture and the texture and the angles of the buildings, and then we set up in front of a dance hall and music was pouring out, and I've always loved Latin rhythm, and I think some of the cha-cha-cha got into the paintings I was doing.
How'd you know? Yeah,
right?
This is exactly what happened to us in Cuba.
I know, and I didn't get to go on the trip, and I am a salsa dancer, and I wish I'd been there. But so now the artist has handed the interviewer some great quotes, some color. And it wouldn't be bad to even prepare, a little talks like this in advance of your conversation, or have an idea of where you're going to go, to give them some good material to use.
I'm going to let you in on something that refers to that. I always rehearse everything.
You do.
First off, I know you're extremely prepared. You always have notes, and I usually do too. But I rehearse everything. So, like, if I'm driving to something, whether it's a meeting or an interview or anything, I'm actually sitting there talking to myself and rehearsing it. And especially if I'm going to be on television or radio or interviewed or something like that, I want to have this articulated in my head before I go into there. So I'll actually say it out loud, sometimes 2 or 3 times, because then, because you're kind of adjusting things and you want it to sound right. Because, the worst possible thing is when you leave it and you go, oh, I wish this would have happened. I was talking to an artist the other day who called me the minute after the podcast. He says, oh, I meant to say this. And I said, sorry, Charlie, too late. Well, no, we got to do it again. I said, no, we don't have the schedule, the time. And so I think that's a really important part, especially if you're not naturally gregarious or you're not naturally outgoing.
Yes, exactly. And, you may have to elaborate a little, on what happened. It's okay, but, paint a picture with your words. And, if you're feeling like, oh, I don't have anything to say, I mean, I've interviewed now like David LaFell, these great long stories. I just did Charles Kovacic, who had umpteen careers in antiques dealer, and then actor, and tons of material. But if you think, oh well, I don't have much to say, I have put together some ways I'd like to share about people developing some material to give to an interviewer. If we can proceed with that now, is that okay?
Well, this begs the question.
Okay.
And I don't want to put you on the spot, but
no, okay.
Is the story almost more important than the art?
Oh, well, the art hopefully will appear on the page so that they will be seeing the images. And part of what the person would be talking about would be their aesthetics and when they can imagine a painting being done and that sort of thing. My point that I'm making is that if they're going to be talking about their art, they want to talk about the process, the experience of painting, right, versus the facts and figures of it, because that makes the good text.
The reason I asked that question is because I won't mention names right now because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I actually I'm a publisher first. I'm trying to lead this plein air movement. I'm trying to get people excited, et cetera. And I got invited into a pretty significant museum for my artwork, but my artwork is not of the quality of the people that would normally be there. And I questioned it. I said, I don't understand this. I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly here, but I can't live up to that standard yet because I don't have the experience and so on. And the answer was, yeah, but it's not necessarily about that. It's your involvement in that and the fact that you're also a painter. So I wondered if, for instance, you might, if somebody had a story of interest, but their artwork didn't necessarily measure up to some of the other artwork that you were featuring. That's why I asked that question. Oh, yeah. I would say yes, because they're contributing to the general world of the contemporary traditional painting that we believe in. And if they've done something really, really interesting, that also gives them a great deal of credit. Or they may be, they're contributing to our world in another way, but they certainly get credit for it, as you do. And I could name names, and I won't. But of course, I've done that, and it makes good copy also. But that's fine. Well, I think the importance of documenting the reality of the situation is really important. I mean, I also could name names, but I won't. But there are certainly people who are stepping out and doing very unique and interesting things that are important to our times from an artistic standpoint, and maybe they don't live up to a particular standard that somebody else has set, but they do have some other contribution. So it makes sense. Yes, I think so, very much. All right. Well, I'm really looking forward to the book you're going to do about me. well, hire me and I will. Oh, touche. Well. Is this on record? Well, I think unfortunately it would be about one page. So you started to say. Yeah. Well, I want to tell people that, and I was advised by a top New York editor about this because she had presented a book and kind of the editor said, oh, no, I just want to know, the timeline on this and that. And it was like, no, I want to talk about the person and how, the experiences they're having. So for you, for the artist, what you want to put together for your interview is
descriptions of the times you've been out painting. And you want the reader to be able to breathe the air you were breathing, to imagine the heat of the day, the scents in the air. Or I was just reading in the book that I had done, Joseph Paquette said, to be able to hear the bees buzzing, that's what they're trying to convey in their art, and also you should in what you're describing. Libby Tolley keeps winding up with a lot of text in what I do because she really can tell a wonderful tale about where she's been painting. One instance was she was out at Old Creek Bridge near San Luis Obispo, and she always has the specifics of the location. And this was before gentrification. She says it still hasn't been gentrified. Early morning, and the fog was low, and then it suddenly began to lift, and then the sunlight came through, and she was able to paint what she said was one of the best paintings ever. And she said that she wanted to give the feel of this in the painting, of the light brightening. Well, that then paints a picture for me to give to the reader. She also had painted in an area of a mile-long stretch of ranch, still privately owned, but a part of a conservation effort. And the artist can also speak about the location in terms of the protection of the land. There's stories to tell around the locale is what I'm saying. Kathleen Dunphy painted this was for one of the Rizzoli books. Kathleen was setting out to paint the sunrise on the summer solstice, and she went out a day early to sketch in the composition on the canvas, and then she said she got up early in the morning, like 3:34, and put the dogs in the back of the truck and ran over to the location she was planning to paint, and she painted the sunrise. She got that 15 minutes in that way. I think that's impressive, and I think a reader wants to know that. Rick Humphrey, painting down in Palos Verdes, he talked about a magic moment. And so you can think about any magic moments you might have had. He was out at dusk painting a hillside, and an owl swooped down through that vista and hooted, I'm assuming, and it was breathtaking. Something funny might have happened. Eric Merrill was out at Joshua Tree last spring in the quirky weather, and some snowflakes started falling, and then he was engrossed in what he was doing, and more snowflakes came by, and a park ranger came by and said, "Are you okay?" Because the snow had started to cover his equipment or whatever. I think at one point the wind blew his easel over into the snow. But at any rate, a good tale to tell, and he finally, of course, got out of there. Can I go on, Eric, with some more examples?
Yeah, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Thanks. Also, the challenges of a location, and this is from Marcia Burt. Where to park along the Big Sur? You can't park everywhere. That's why we have probably more limited views painted of the Big Sur than we realize. What we know of the Big Sur are mostly photographs taken from planes, through the Auto Club, their articles and stuff. But she was looking for a new place to paint on the Big Sur, and she figured out driving north, which allows you to park on the hillside and not the edge of the Big Sur itself on the cliff, that she found a place to park there and then painted. It was a little further south than the exact Big Sur, but talking about that as part of the challenges of painting.
It's also documenting things that, for instance, that 50 years from now, when somebody's reading that book, that road might not even exist.
Oh, absolutely, and everybody's aware of that, and that's close to my heart. Now another aspect where you can hook your interview onto where you painted would be just the actual history of the place. And something that came to mind was the town of Mendocino. That's where Camille Przewodek has painted a lot of those street scenes and the wonderful intricate architecture. Then you might add that Mendocino was founded by guys who had wrecked their ship right there and had to start some sort of community until people came up to get them. And when they did, they saw all that beautiful redwood. The redwood then went down to San Francisco to help build the city of San Francisco circa 1850 in the gold rush. And at the same time, the locals then began to build their houses out of that redwood, and hence you got the craftsman Victorian design there, which artists love to go paint. So that all ties in with a nice little bit of text again for an article.
I would also say, just as just to kind of pile on there, is that this is a good habit for all artists to get into anyway, not just for interviews, but I take a Sharpie and write notes on the back of my paintings. The other day I went over to Kevin McPherson's house and I wrote down, what we talked about and what we did and, how we had wine together and all that kind of stuff. And the reason is because I want to be able to tell the story to my gallery. So oftentimes when I send something to the gallery, and I teach this in my marketing, is the idea that you want to tell the story and you want the story to be a little bit romanticized. You want to talk about, like in my Sunday morning coffee blog, I always start out with, the fog is dense and you can barely see the trees through them. Well, you're creating a visual picture. You're taking people to another place. And that's what you were doing when you were telling the stories of the sunsets and so on. And then you can say, a rabbit jumped, a mouse ran across my easel and left a track and I left it in, whatever it is.
Yeah, right. The moose was over there. I've heard that. And the sea lions that they thought were rocks and it turned out to be, animals. Yes. So we're romancing all of this too and making it very inviting and entertaining too. If a person there's a painting, it has a great location, the location has a story, you're telling the person interviewing you, you also have a better chance of that painting showing up if there are illustrations in the article, because now the writer can tie in text with a picture that they're running. So if there's a picture you want in your article, get a story on it for your talk with that person. And you have a better chance of getting it. Is that true?
I think it's excellent advice, and I've never really heard it articulated the way that you have, and I think I'm going to use it in my marketing course next time, just because. Okay.
That's a little trick. That's a little trick.
I think it's really important, because I think if you want any kind of publicity at all, I mean, the best way to engage anybody who's writing a story about you is to tell them the stories of your experiences. Yeah,
absolutely. And people love to know about that. Kevin McPherson is so funny, but he said to me, people are so impressed by whatever we do. They're even impressed when you just set up your French easel. That's enough. It's like, wow, did you see what he did? So now another hook is to talk about your artistic tradition that you're part of. And if you don't feel you're part of one, look around, you might be. Like if you're painting up on the Hudson River, well, then you're part of the Hudson River School tradition, and you can mention Frederick Church and Thomas Cole if you want.
Or you can mention that you're there because they inspired you and you wanted to experience what they experienced.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And then somebody like, again, Camille, I happen to be mentioning, because she always is introducing herself as part of the Cape School of Art tradition, founded by Charles Hawthorne and later directed by Henry Henchy, who she studied with. And so saying something like that validates your own work currently. We're always, and Elaine, who is so good at branding for the California Art Club and marketing, is always talking about the tradition of the West Coast plein air painters. And we like to feel like we're part of that history.
Well, and we're in a really special moment in time. As Jean Stern said at the Plein Air Convention a couple of years ago, he said, this is the largest movement in the history of art. More people
I
painting
heard him say
now.
that. Yeah.
The people who are listening to this, who are painting, they're part of something that people will look back on and they'll go, I wish I could have gone to an event like the Plein Air Convention, which, maybe in a few years doesn't exist anymore. And I always romanticize. I look at the pictures of Monet and friends in the cafes, in Paris, and I go, gee, I wish I were there. Well, you guys are there now. I mean, this is a special moment in time you got to take advantage of.
Well, and I think that whatever is happening with the marketing of plein air, I can only see more and more people wanting to do it. It is an enchanting experience, going out and painting in nature. What could be better? And I think only more and more people are going to want to be doing it. I can only see it growing, frankly.
Yeah, well, we have announced kind of quietly that we have a deal on a national television show with a major network. And
wow.
It's going to be, we're casting it now, and people can apply for the casting to be on the show, but it's going to draw a lot of attention. We think it's going to draw a lot of attention and bring a lot more people to painting.
I wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. I want to make sure that I also mention some things not to do in an interview. When you're being interviewed, don't be too truthful. Watch what you say. All right, we're all plein air painters, and I had found a painting I wanted to do and put in the book for sure. And so I called and interviewed the artist, and he said, well, actually, he said, I was leaving the supermarket, and I got to my car. I looked up. I saw this gorgeous color on the San Gabriel Mountains, and so I got out my iPhone, whatever, took a picture, and then later I remembered I had this, and I painted it back in the studio. I probably don't want to know that. I would not ever put that in unless the person said, no, I really want to say this is my method of working or whatever. But be careful. The other thing is that after an interview is over, and I will put my pen down, and then I sit back, and then the person starts really talking, and they go, well, if you really want to know, and then they may give a gem that I really want to use, or it will be too off the cuff, and then I won't put it in. But it's a phenomenon I have seen over and over. So just be aware of that.
Makes a lot of sense.
And, yeah. And also, an artist should know you have the right to ask. It may not be granted, but to ask to read the article before it goes to print. Because I personally like to quote people, but I kind of make up the quotes too. It's not word for word, and I always show my articles because I want to make sure it sounds like the person, and of course anything that is inaccurate. The easiest way is just to send it back to the person, and then they say, no, I left New York in 77 and not 80 or something like that. So you can definitely ask about that. I don't know if you do that with your articles, Eric, but for the CAC I do.
The way we approach it is we will allow somebody to check for facts. But but unless we've got something totally wrong, the worst case scenario is you're on a deadline, and
yes, of course,
somebody decides they want to change the entire essence of things, and
no, nothing like that.
And that's the kiss of death. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you that I think would be helpful for people, but and this doesn't really, it may or may not impact you, but the one thing that happens is that people will contact me and they'll say, hey, you know, I'd like to have an article in the magazine, and I'm doing this and this really cool thing, and you know, there's a cool story. Like I just interviewed this lady that walked 1,000 miles and painted every 5 miles. And but if she had called and said, by the way, I just had the story in this magazine and I just had it in that magazine and now I'm giving it to you, it's like, no, thank you. I mean, because nobody wants to be third, right? And so if they call you and say, hey, you know, I was just in this book and this book and this book, you might be like, well, maybe this isn't so unique. I don't know.
No, that's interesting. I'm seeing one more point because I, of course, am looking at, I've developed notes for this talk. I will say to an artist, well, and what masters do you follow? You know, who are the historic greats, you know, who inspire you? And they could say, oh, well, you know, George Inness and Andrew Wyeth, whatever. Also be able to say why you are inspired by these artists. This then makes material for the article, such as Joaquim Sorolla for the way he paints his whites, and then like I have done in this painting here, again, a chance to get that painting into the article. George Inness, because of his sense of spiritual presence in the imagery, all right? Andrew Wyeth for the sensitivity of his line, right? Now it becomes something that is teaching the reader more about you.
Excellent.
And then also, do you keep a library in your studio? What books are there? And then do you use websites such as Pinterest or other sites? Do you research images on that? I have been. You know, if you want the patterning of the dark shapes on the moon, you're not going to be standing out just looking at the moon. You can go to Pinterest and see how other people have rendered that. So how much do you use the internet these days for your research, for your imagery? That would be good to include too. And of course, you can also talk about your current painters that you're studying with, and what you're getting from their work. You can go into talking about your studio. I interviewed John Asaro, and he had just redone his studio down at his house, and he had done a wonderful arrangement of where he could alter the shades on his north light windows, and so that became part of the article. You can talk about your palette in some cases. Some people want to know the brand of paint you use because they're also looking to tie that in with any advertisers that they are following. Then, if you will want to submit paint images, I'm assuming for most articles, and you would have in advance, have prepared, say 8 to 10 images that the magazine or whatever can choose from. And what we always ask for at the newsletter, but also absolutely on the books, high-res and low-res versions.
Could I
because
stop?
the high-res...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, please. No. So the high-res is for the final book, and the art director needs a low-res to lay out for the pages because she can move them around more easily.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop there because I think this is really a critical point for everybody, and that is that I can't tell you how many times in the last 15 years of PleinAir magazine that we've had an article written pretty close, ready to go to press, but we're waiting for images, and the images show up and they're out of focus, or they were photographed on somebody's iPhone, or and so get professional images taken. It really makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, as you go. If you think you've really painted a winner right then and there, whether you haven't even let it out of the studio yet, you get it documented. You'll be glad later. Absolutely. And also, along with that, a great gift to the person you're working with is to have your the captions ready. Also, make sure to have include captions, accurate captions, nicely typed it out, very well, very readable, with the title, the medium, and the size, and the name of the collection if you want to include that. But that helps. For me, working on the Rizzoli books, I might have put in 2 months, I'm sure, on just collecting the images, high and low res, back and forth with people. Incredible. And then loads of time on the captions. I also want to say that this kind of advice, if you're thinking about self-publishing a book, all right, this is exactly the advice you want to follow in doing that, because then you'll be interviewing yourself. You'll know what kind of material to put in the book also for yourself.
The bottom line on all of this, Molly, is if you're listening to this, and if you have the desire to be a professional artist, meaning selling your artwork and promoting yourself, then you have to be a pro. You have to act like a pro, and there are the things that you've outlined are what the pros do. And I will tell you from personal experience that I have met artists who would be a lot more famous today if they just had their act together on these little things. And they're not so little, really, but if you've got to get good at selling and presenting yourself, putting yourself out there, getting your work done properly, getting your things photographed, all of those things matter. Having your stories and articulating them, they all matter, because if you're looking down at the ground and kicking your feet and an interviewer is going to go, you know what, this isn't that interesting, I'm not going to use that story. And we have had this happen where we'll find a brilliant artist and we want to do something on them, but we just can't get enough out of them. And so it's like, okay, well, we'll skip that one for now. Maybe later they'll step up and give us some information.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if I email somebody and say, oh, we're doing a book, and how about, and would you have anything of Malibu? And I heard back, I can't think of the guy's name right now, the same night I get back an image sent to me. I couldn't believe it. And yes, the more well-known people, I have to tell you, are terrific at this. And they're thorough and they're professional. I needed an image from John Cosby of Laguna at dusk with all those lights lit up on Pacific Coast Highway. And the painting had already sold, and I said, oh, I need a higher res of it, and what do you have, and whatever. He went to the collector, got the painting off the wall, and took it to be photographed for me. And it got a double-page spread in the book.
And I will tell you this too, Molly. I've had art dealers, galleries tell me that they're trying to build a show for an artist to try to sell some of their work, and the artist keeps missing the deadlines. I know of one artist who was part of a pretty major show that missed his deadlines, and so he got yanked out of the show. So this stuff matters.
Yeah. The guy is Charles Munch. I emailed him. He was the one who got back to me with an image of Malibu Canyon, which I never thought I would even thought to ask for. Fabulous, and got in the book. Charles Munch.
Yeah, he's a great painter too.
Molly,
this has been absolutely delightful. Any final thoughts for everybody?
Oh, well, I mean, you know why I write the articles? It's so I can know all of you. And it's always a pleasure and a real privilege, I feel. And that's how I really get paid for all this. So thank you for being out there.
Well, and thank you for being on the PleinAir Podcast.
Okay. Great, Eric.
Well, thanks again to Molly Siple. I think you should take what she says very seriously. She has some solid advice. I'm going to take some of that advice myself, as a matter of fact. So are you ready for some marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your marketing questions. You can email me, eric@pleinairmagazine.com, with your questions, like this one from Dylan in, Homer, Alaska. I wonder if it's getting cold up there yet. Dylan says, I feel like I should network with other artists more. How do I find the right society or the group for me and my style? Well, Dylan, you're right. You should. It's a good thing. There's tremendous value in networking with others, no matter what you're doing. But it's fun. It's nice to know others around you. It's nice to know that they have the same challenges you have. They may paint differently than you do, but that's okay because you're going to learn something from everybody you meet. And they will stimulate your ideas. They'll give you critiques and instruction. And it's just nice to be part of something bigger, part of a community. Now, I'm not very active in the local community here in Austin, Texas. I know a lot of people here, but I just don't have a lot of time because I travel so much. But I do have my own paint group on Wednesday nights when I'm in town, and everybody comes over to the studio, and it's my chance for local networking, and it's great because I hear things that are going on. I feel like a part of the community, and then, if I'm struggling with something, I can say, what would you do here with this ear? Usually I bring a model into the studio. So it's my form of networking. So I learn a lot from them. And I kind of created that myself. So if in Homer, Alaska, if you can't find anybody, and I'm sure there's lots of artists there, but if you can't, start digging around, start your own thing. Go to the local art supply place, if there is one, I'm sure there is, and post something, on a bulletin board. Maybe you can look for something on Google or Meetup or something. You're going to find them. People tell me all the time that they didn't know other painters were around their area, and then they found them, they connect, they go painting together, have a lot of fun. So if you haven't got one, just start your own. The next question is from Paul in Los Angeles. Paul says, I've heard many people say that the artist should never have contact with collectors because that's the gallery's job. Is that true? Well, the gallery's job is to help you. Your job is to help them. Is it true? Well, I'll probably get some arrows through my head for answering this one, but it depends on who you ask, right? Some gallery people will tell you, absolutely, we want artists engaged. Others will tell you, no, they don't. It depends on the individual gallery owners, and they have their reasons. And usually the reason is because they've been burned with some kind of a problem in the past, and artists doing something inappropriate, saying something inappropriate, going around them, etc. But let me tell you this. A gallery owner once said to me that she had an opening, invited a bunch of artists that were in the show, and instead of mingling well with the collectors, and sometimes that's why they come to meet the artists, they all got drunk and loud and didn't engage with other people. And one actually got so loud and so drunk that she was embarrassed and later fired that artist from the gallery. Now, the artist told me about this, and he said, well, that's my persona. I'm a creative, an artist. He said, but it turned him off, and I got fired. Yep, happens. I've been to hundreds of art openings, and I've seen every imaginable horror story of inappropriate behavior. Somebody telling a dirty joke to a mixed crowd, and somebody who's about to buy a painting who gets disgusted and turns away. I watched an artist come on to a beautiful woman. It turned out to be a collector's wife. Not a good idea. Really bad stuff. So it's no wonder they want them to stay away in some cases. Once an artist I heard about had the guts to undermine a gallery. The artist told the collector that he met at the gallery opening that he'd give him a better price if the painting had not sold by the end of the week. Well, how foolish was that? The guy probably would have bought it, but instead he decided to wait. Nobody else bought it. He contacted the guy, or the artist contacted the guy, tried to sell it. The guy was ethical and said, I'm going to call the gallery owner, and gallery owner fired the artist. You just can't do stuff like that. Gallery owners need to see you as a partner to help them sell, to create publicity, to make people feel good about your work and the work in the gallery. My gallery held a reception for me recently, sold 2 paintings during the reception. They weren't my paintings either, but I had pointed out to a collector a couple of paintings that I really loved, and they bought those. How cool is that? I hope another artist would do that for me someday. Your gallery can tell you how they want you to be, how they want you to act, what they want you to wear, how they want you to behave. You have to decide if you want to participate in that. And if not, you should probably stay away. Now, some artists are really good at interacting with collectors. They know how to be engaging and appropriate, how to be tasteful. Others are not good at it. As John Stobart said that, he was good at buttering people up, right? So some galleries keep artists far away because they hurt sales. The key is knowing, having an open dialogue and being trustworthy, having a discussion with the gallery. Be a trusted partner. You're not there to party. You're there in a professional capacity to help them sell. Be a professional. I hope that helps. Anyway, that's the Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Thanks again to everybody who's been listening, and I hope you will consider coming to the PleinAir Convention, PleinAirConvention.com, or the Figurative Art Convention, FigurativeArtConvention.com. And if you've not seen my blog on Sunday mornings where I kind of talk about life and philosophy, check it out. CoffeeWithEric.com. That's where you can subscribe. It's called Sunday Coffee. CoffeeWithEric.com is where you get it. Always fun. Loving being here in France. Let's do this some more. We'll be on again next week. I think next week I'll be in Scotland, but I will manage to get through to you here. I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine, and loving being in the plein air world. Remember, it's a big world, so go paint it. That's why I'm doing it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhodes. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.